Quite the uninspiring performance for the Florida Panthers in their last game of their 3-game homestand. But now the Panthers have to shift as now they won't be home for another 2 weeks.
Your Locked On Panthers, your daily podcast on the Florida Panthers. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
And welcome into this Wednesday, October 23rd edition of the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. We're to our team every day. Thank you for making the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast your first listen of the day. I'm Armando Velez from the Hockey News. You can follow me on X at MondoMan12. Follow the show account on X and Instagram at LO_FLA Panthers. And shout out to the everydayers who come back here and get your daily Florida Panthers fix. Today's episode is brought to you by Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNHL for $20 off your first purchase. And you could do that all on Game Time. So the Panthers, like we said, they're going on the road now for the next 2+ weeks, but did not end this homestand really well as they had the return of Matthew Tkachuk, who was going through an illness, said he was ready to contribute and be part of it. The Panthers were 3-1-1 throughout that stretch, but in the return of Matthew Tkachuk, and after 10 minutes of the Panthers creating their fair share of opportunities, the Minnesota Wild scored 2 goals very quickly, and the Panthers got it at least to a 3-1 deficit, but the Minnesota Wild responded to the quick goal by Sam Bennett, and they put it on the throats of the Florida Panthers. Bob gets chased for the first time this season, and it was a performance that was the best way I could put it, pretty uninspiring for the Florida Panthers here on Tuesday night, on a frozen frenzy Tuesday night for the entirety of the National Hockey League, which thank goodness the Florida Panthers had the second game on the night. So the game ended early. So it was easier to move on and just continue to watch the hockey. But joining me on this edition of the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast, who was actually, unfortunately, at the game tonight to witness this 5-1 loss for the Florida Panthers against the Minnesota Wild, Jacob Winans is back here on the show. Jacob, now you're 2-1 when you're in the building for Panther games this season. You're over 500, but usually in years past, not so well. But hey, you still have a positive record overall this season, at least.
Yeah, I can't complain too much. Wins against Boston and Vegas were a lot of fun, so I'll take those W's, and this one sucks a little bit, but yeah, it was just kind of a weird night in general. I know a lot of Panthers fans experienced the same thing, but just getting to the arena tonight was tough. Weather wasn't great. You get there, energy wasn't really what you're typically used to, and then the Panthers came out a little bit flat themselves, and then you sort of lost the crowd energy pretty early, and Minnesota just kind of coasted from there. So tough night all around. But at the end of the day, it's like you said, pre-recording, the sky's not falling. Team was due for a stinker. We've seen how they play in the games that they've really gotten up for this season. It's tough to expect playoff intensity from a team that just won the Stanley Cup and expect them to bring that on a every single night basis. In theory, you would love to have that. You would love for that to be the reality. That's just not the way it goes in an 82-game marathon of a season. So tough one tonight. The team didn't really have it. They didn't have the legs. They didn't have the execution. They didn't have the precision. Looked a little disjointed. And they didn't get the goaltending. So you kind of throw it out, burn the tape, and move on.
Yeah, and that's something that was spoken to at Media Day even to start this season. We're going to have a game in, Paul Maurice specifically said November, but hey, it came before November, where they're going to lose to a Western Conference team. He said in that quote, against a Western Conference team that might not make the playoffs, Minnesota's looking great. They still haven't trailed all season for them. So they're still the 3 teams in the entirety of the NHL who haven't lost in regulation after the Jets won tonight, 6-0. The New York Rangers defeated Montreal, which is the Florida Panthers' next opponent. So that still stands as far as the 3 teams who are still unbeaten in regulation, at least. But even for the Panthers getting their fair share of chances in the first 10 minutes after the second TV timeout, the Minnesota Wild scored 2 goals in 22 seconds. And really, it felt like really game over from there. I mean, yeah, the Jesper Boquist line created some odd chances on odd man rushes, started to get pucks deep. But really, for the Panthers, the story of this one was net front presence on redirections. One of them on the power play, one at 5-on-5 for them. But it was also just about transitions for after winning defensive zone draws, chipping it up, and then getting behind the defense. I mean, on the first one where Kulikov pinched in and didn't secure the wall well. There was that dish to Johansson, with a clear shooting lane there for him. And I mean, really for even on the third goal, which I had a little bit of a hard time processing that interference by Sam Bennett. I did not think that was interference, even though the Minnesota Wild scored on that power play. But I mean, the Panthers didn't even draw a penalty. That's how you know that their legs weren't there for them, and the execution, like you said, that they weren't. You didn't see the physicality on them, like on winning their battles in order to draw those hooks or beat them to get a stick extended to at least go to the ground for a trip. So it really just came down to that. And then on the fourth one, which we'll get to more in relation to the fourth goal and a little bit later in the show, that was really kind of a series of unfortunate events where Bob comes out of the net, Bennett crashes into him, and then they score into an open net. So just a lot of communication breakdowns for the Panthers all over throughout this night.
Yeah, definitely. It was textbook definition of chasing the game. They got off to a decent start, didn't capitalize early. The forecheck wasn't really there. There was really no sustained pressure. So when you have that, you kind of need to, if you're going to have one of those nights where there's no forecheck, there's no sustained pressure, you got to score early and at least play from ahead. Failed to do that. And then when they fall behind, it seemed like they just had a tough time getting the engine running and getting the forecheck and starting to wear on Minnesota, where we've seen them where they have a deficit early, where they kind of turn up the pressure and they can wear a team down and claw their way back into it that way. That's what they did against Vegas, having multiple different deficits in that game and coming back each time, just kind of grinding Vegas into the ground a little bit. They just didn't have the will to do it tonight. It's a team that they don't see often for whatever reason. Lately, they've really struggled in their few matchups with Minnesota. If the Panthers make it back to the Stanley Cup, let's hope that Minnesota is not the team facing them, because it seems like the Wild have the Panthers number. But that's a team that's in rhythm. That's a team that's playing great hockey to start the year. That's a team that's definitely motivated, especially with some of the stories coming out about Kaprizov and could he have his eye elsewhere. They want to show that they have something there that can contend and is attractive to be a part of. So I love the way the Wild are playing. They're getting great goaltending as well. Panthers didn't make it challenging at all for Gustavsson tonight, aside from the one Bennett chance, which I thought might come back with a kick. Ultimately, it didn't, but sure looked like it could have. It was a razor thin margin to being a shutout for the Wild. And honestly, if it was a shutout, I would say that was the deserved outcome, because the Panthers did not do nearly enough to make life difficult for the Wild. And that was in all three zones, offensive, defensive, neutral zone, got manhandled in all of them. And that's just the way it goes sometimes. So definitely a lot to clean up before Thursday's game against the Rangers. That game, I don't know if you saw during the Frozen Frenzy, but that one looks like it could get interesting. We'll see if Jacob Trouba's available. Could potentially see some supplemental discipline for yet another hit to the head, causing a concussion to another player. We'll see what the Rangers put on the ice, but Panthers have some things to clean up before they head to New York.
Yeah, and even before the possible kick from Sam Bennett, I thought Tkachuk was slightly offside after that stretch from Nate Schmidt.
It looked like it.
It looked like it at first, so I was just like, "Oh, this might be coming back." But hey, the Minnesota Wild didn't challenge that, and hey, Sam Bennett 5 goals, he continues to stay hot, and the Broward Humane Society gets another sponsored pet as Sam Bennett's initiative and doing it in a contract year for him. But still, it didn't make a difference due to the Panthers' just overall sloppiness, especially with how they were just doing as far as when the pucks were deep and getting it back. 3 out of the 5 goals were at least around the circles or above for the Minnesota Wild. So that's another thing, and just a good amount of shooting lanes and chasing the play, which created those deflections where the Minnesota Wild got into that soft ice area and just made it hard for Bobrovsky on the night, which he eventually got pulled after the 40 minutes, which Spencer Knight came in, stopped all 6 shots, but just a performance that, like you said, you throw it away, and you see you're going to see these in an 82 game season. So that's hopefully the Panthers bounce back there for their game on Thursday night. But we're going to transition over to segment number 2, where we're going to discuss more of our 3 duds of the game and the moment where we thought the game was lost. We are going to discuss this and more next here on the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast. Today's episode is brought to you by Game Time. And Game Time has a new feature called Game Time Picks that makes getting tickets for your favorite live events even faster. And the Game Time Picks creation makes it easier to save more on sports, concert, comedy, theater, and more. With the seat views, you can get a panoramic view from your seat in the app before you buy it. The lowest price guarantee or Game Time will credit you 110% of the difference. The Game Time ticket coverage, your purchase is covered with the most flexible customer service policy in the ticketing industry. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNHL for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDON for $20 off. Download Game Time today. What time is it? Game Time. Also, today's episode is brought to you by Prize Picks. You can now win 100 times your money on Prize Picks with as little as 4 correct picks. You sign up today and you can get $50 instantly when you play $5. You don't even need to win to receive the $50 bonus. It's guaranteed. Think Justin Jefferson will get more than 83.5 yards this week? Or Tyreek Hill, now that Tua Tagovailoa is back, will he get 100 yards? Prize Picks is the easiest way to get real money during football season. Which players are going to go off? Download the app today and use code LOCKEDONNHL to get $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. Once again, download the app and use code LOCKEDONNHL for $50 off. $50 instantly, after you play your first $5 bet. Prize Picks. Run your game. Segment number 2 here on this Wednesday, October 23rd edition of the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast. Thank you once again for making the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast your first listen of the day here on a Wednesday as the Florida Panthers fall to the Minnesota Wild at home by a final score of 5-1 in Sunrise, Florida at the end of their 3-game homestand. And now for the next 2+ weeks, we won't see a home game until November 7th when the Panthers welcome in Nashville Predators. The next 5, 3 in New York, and then 2 of them in Tampere, Finland for the Global Series. Something to be excited about, even though we do have a bad taste in our mouths from this one. But 3 duds of the game for this one. Let's go to this part of the segment for this edition of the show. And the 3 duds, I'm going to start with the top line for the Panthers, the Lundell, Luostarinen, Reinhart line. Man, and something I spoke about with Seth Topol of Locked On Wild is just getting your matchups, even though for the Minnesota Wild, they don't have last change for this one, but they were able to really neutralize. The 3 guys combined for 2 shots, and both of them came from Sam Reinhart. So as far as the driving play, gaining the zone, not forcing them east-west, and even the one-and-dones, man, without that, obviously, whenever you're missing your top center in Sasha Barkov, makes it a little harder to roll the 4 lines as easily. But really how they matched up against that top line, a superb job. So 3rd dud is that top line for the Panthers. Number two on this one is Aaron Ekblad chasing plays, creating multiple opportunities for redirections, and just like I said, chasing the play for the Panthers, and that led to multiple chances for the Minnesota Wild. And then you won't see this guy up here often, just like how you won't see the top line guys often. Sergei Bobrovsky, five goals. I mean, yeah, there was a lot of shooting lanes for Sergei Bobrovsky, but I mean the Eriksson Ek one. I mean, you maybe thought you committed low a little early on that one, even though Aaron Ekblad was got the puck chipped around him before Eriksson Ek gained the zone and then shot that one through Bobrovsky. So those are going to be my three duds of the game. How about you, Jacob?
Yeah. So number three for me is it's kind of a little bit of a slight concern at this point, how often it seems like he's ending up in this list. But number three for me is Evan Rodriguez. I feel like he had another tough night. A lot of turnovers, getting shots blocked. They've kind of tried him on a couple different lines. Hasn't really clicked with anybody yet. You'd like to think when Barkov is back, you can balance out the lines and put him on a group that he has some chemistry with, that he's produced with, whether that's back with Bennett and Tkachuk or on the top line with Barkov and potentially Reinhart again, or even the third line if he goes with Lundy and Etu. Once Barkov's back in the lineup, you really have some good options depending on what you envision doing with Mackey. But Erod is struggling right now. It's not a huge concern, I guess. He's a proven playoff performer. He's a guy who contributed last year. He's streaky. He'll bounce back and snap out of it. But tough night again for Erod. Second dud of the night. I was tempted to put Ekblad Forsling as a pair. I think they both struggled tonight. I think the matchups they were given and just kind of the lack of effort from the forecheck and the production, I'll spare them on this one. But the Schmidt-Boqvist pairing tonight, it did not look great to me. Schmidt made a couple of not great decisions on pinches, gave up some odd man rushes. I thought Boqvist defensively was kind of scrambling around a little bit. I didn't really see a whole lot of crispness on the ozone breakouts, and I've been generally unimpressed with that pairing so far. And at one stretch in the game, it looked like I wasn't sure from my vantage point if Boqvist was either hurt or they were just trying something new. But there were a few shifts where Boqvist was completely off the ice, and they replaced him with Uvis Belinskis on that pairing. And Belinskis has been playing forward for the last few games, so something to monitor there. The Boqvist experiment hasn't been off to the flying start that we hoped, but there's still a ton of potential there, and I'm sure he'll settle in. And the number one dud for me is obviously Sergei Bobrovsky. He didn't have a ton of a chance on stopping most of these goals. A lot of them were high danger, right in his face, deflections, clean shots right in the slot. You don't want to pin it all on the goalie, but he's a guy that you typically at least get a few big saves from, the game-changing saves, the kind of ones that keep you in it. He didn't get that tonight. The chance, it seemed like every chance that was at Bob, that was a grade A chance, was in the back of the net. And then obviously the fifth goal, really want that one back. That's just one-on-one, getting beat off the wing, played a poor angle and got burned. So you won't hear this often. You won't hear Bob on this list very often, but even the best have a tough night, and it was a tough night from Bob. I will say though, if your goalie is going to struggle and have a bad night, you'd rather it come on a night where the entire team struggles versus a game where the entire team plays well, but your goalie lets you down. It's better when it comes in a night where everybody lets you down, because Bob could have been superhuman and they still would have lost tonight.
Yeah, couldn't agree more there. And the moment where we thought the game was lost, I mean, with how quickly the Minnesota Wild responded, and it was just basically on a communication breakdown, just on chasing over to the strong side. Kaprizov goes around in circles. A bump from Bobrovsky and Sam Bennett doesn't allow him to get back in his to his crease, and then Zuccarello goes into an open net. And just thinking, man, you're thinking you cut it at least to 2, and you maybe make it a game. Maybe you try to escape with a point, but that put every damper into the chances of the Florida Panthers to at least get one on the night. And I mean, I will say, with the injuries that they've suffered early in the season, things sometimes regress to the mean. So all these banking of the points for the Panthers that they've done recently, it's kind of a little bit of a reset here for what's going on here for this team. So, but with the goal to make it 4-1, that was my moment.
Yep. So you made a couple good points there. Other teams are going to have injuries. Teams that start hot will cool down. Panthers have kind of been right in the middle of that. Some hot stretches, some cold stretches, a couple bad games here. But overall, good, solid, consistent play for the most part. This is an outlier. And I'm not concerned about where they are as far as their points right now. That's definitely not a concern for me at the moment, especially when they're getting healthy, hopefully very soon here. We do have the same moment where I thought this game was lost. The Panthers cut it to 3-1. The building was buzzing for a little bit, and you want to come out and put together a really strong shift. They did for maybe half of a shift right after that goal, and then they get an unfortunate stoppage of play, which takes it to a TV timeout, kills all the momentum, and then the Wild come back and score. But one thing I will say is it doesn't matter what the time of year is, doesn't matter what jersey he's wearing, doesn't matter what the circumstances. Matt Zuccarello, for whatever reason, is always going to put a goal on the Panthers. It is the strangest thing. He's just at the top of the Panther killer list. But Matt Zuccarello is always going to find a way to score on Florida for whatever reason. So that was expected.
Yeah, and for Zuccarello, as I am looking up his splits at the moment as we are chatting here, Matt Zuccarello against the Florida Panthers over a point per game. This isn't updated actually. 31 points in 29 games prior to tonight. So yeah, he definitely has that production for the Florida Panthers. He always finds a way there, including 15 goals prior to that. So now add 16 to it for him.
Which is crazy if you think about that. That's Zuccarello, who's not exactly a sniper. He's a great player, but he's not a superstar, and he's definitely not a sniper on a 41 goal pace against Florida. So such a strange sort of villain for the Panthers, but I don't know. I guess we expected it.
Yeah, it's still weird seeing him without the lettuce there. So it's crazy to see him with short hair. So definitely different for him. But we're going to transition over to segment number 3, where we are going to actually end this podcast on a little bit of a lighter note, because there was actually an announcement of an extension prior to tonight's game. We've seen different types of extensions since the Stanley Cup win, and now another person in the Florida Panthers organization gets theirs. We're going to discuss that more next here on the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. And hey, NFL fans, you could start the season with a big return on FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. So when you get a hunch in the middle of the game, you can check out the latest stats, view live play-by-play, and so much more on the same page where you can place your bets. You'll get started with $200 in bonus bets guaranteed when you place your first $5 bet. And if you want to place your bets on the Miami Dolphins in their Week 8 matchup against the Arizona Cardinals, a non-conference game where a West team is coming east after playing on Monday Night Football, and you like their chances, hey, maybe there's a chance that they could get back to one game under 500, and you could place the bets there, and you could place it on the money line over at FanDuel.com. And once again, you'll get $200 in bonus bets guaranteed when you place your first $5 bet. And you could do that all at FanDuel.com. And I'd like to thank you guys once again for making the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast your first listen of the day here on a Wednesday edition of the show, where the Florida Panthers lose to the Minnesota Wild by a final score of 5-1 at home in an uninspiring performance by the Cats. But there's some excitement prior to the game, as the Florida Panthers just around 5 o'clock announced that they extended head coach Paul Maurice to a multi-year extension with the franchise. And, something that we are definitely not surprised with. He was entering the final year of his deal. It was just about when, not if, for the head coach. And going into the final year of his deal, there was, even if he didn't get this deal right now, this was never a question that we were just going to present on the podcast. Are they going to extend Paul Maurice or not? Obviously, the coaches don't count against the cap. So that's why it was never something that was put out there for us even. But I mean, really, for everything that Maurice has been through with 20 plus years of coaching, second most in games coached, fourth all time in wins. Now, for him, as I'm pulling up the record for the Panthers here, 98, 59, and 15 in 2+ seasons, 2 trips to the Stanley Cup final, and really for solidifying the group and the continuity of the Panthers. We speak about this with the player, but just having the main voice in the room to inspire the guys, and also to just keep everyone accountable. I mean, this is just another exciting signing the Florida Panthers have made. Excuse me.
Yeah, absolutely. He's more than earned it. That's for sure. He likes to joke. He even joked in discussing it post game about how he's glad the ink dried, because that performance apparently would have taken some dollars off of that contract. But all jokes aside, he's changed the culture for the better. He's been a perfect fit. Players love playing for him. He's seems to be in complete lockstep with management, which is sometimes you can have a great coach, you can have a great general manager, and you can have great talent, but if they don't all see eye to eye on how things should run, or style of play, or salaries, or any number of things, doesn't really matter how good everyone is at their job if they don't have that cohesion and the same vision. So the Panthers take care of a guy who has been a perfect fit, is completely in sync with them and what they envision for the franchise, and they take care of him, and it's exciting to have that stability. The Panthers have never really had that kind of coaching stability. They thought that they were going to have that with Coach Quenneville, and obviously we know what happened with that. But it's something that the Panthers have always really lacked, is they've had so many coaching changes, so many culture changes, so many fits that didn't work. To get a guy who's now won a Stanley Cup for the organization, lock him in long term. It's huge for the franchise. But I will say this, from the Paul Maurice perspective, what an incredible just continuation of his career and his story. After what happened in Winnipeg, where he walked away and felt like he didn't know if he had the fire in him to continue coaching. He didn't know if he could continue doing it. Had to do some resetting and reevaluating his priorities in life, and whether he wanted to continue this career, to find his home in Florida, win a Stanley Cup, and now sign a deal to continue his coaching career and further cement his name as among the greatest coaches to coach in the NHL. Such an incredible way to continue his story, when it looked a couple years ago like he may be nearing the end of it. I think that's a lesson that you can take beyond hockey. I think that's huge in life, and I think Paul Maurice is a great example of that. So that's super good news for the franchise. And one other thing that we just real quick haven't talked about with extending Paul Maurice and kind of having that continuity on the coaching staff, it makes things so much easier when it comes to drafting, developing, and your free agent signings, because you can get guys that fit Paul Maurice's style, fit his culture, fit his system, and you can draft and develop them with the assurance that you have him under contract. He's not going anywhere. And you have time to develop guys in a system versus developing talent. And then they may play for a different coach than the one who was pounding the table for him to be drafted. Panthers have had that all too many times where they've had a good prospect with talent and with potential. But by the time they're ready for the pros, it's a completely different system than what was envisioned when they were picked, and they may not fit anymore. So that's another big positive.
Yeah. And you spoke about lockstep with drafting and trades. I mean, think about how when Paul Maurice was hired, he was hired on June 22nd of 2022 after 122 points. He joked around saying, "Oh, I got this team from 122 to 92." I'm just joking about the team regressing in the regular season, but also his ability to just be honest with himself and saying, "Oh, I think that this group needs a new voice," because I mean, when you're a place for 8 years and you haven't accomplished postseason success, you kind of have to do some soul searching and look at yourself in the mirror. And that's something we spoke about even before the hire. I remember we had a Winans Wednesday edition of the show, really like more convinced about the hire that was going to happen, or we were more up for the idea at the time, but also for Paul Maurice, how quickly, because in a month's time with free agency coming and at the time the draft not happening yet, the framework of putting together that trade for Matthew Tkachuk, obviously Bill Zito is the one to pull the trigger, but obviously there's got to be that communication and say, do you think that this is a guy who would be part of that fit for this team? So that's another thing that is just the continued lockstep, and the fact that you know that when you're trading for guys or bring in free agents, it's like, this is our way, the Panther way, which I want to break down a little bit more in the next week about the Panther way when we have that gap in between the Buffalo game and the global series. But just the fact that you're able to get those things done, and they're it's stapled for South Florida, and the fact that even guys who aren't here or under contract, they know that when they go into a game against the Florida Panthers, that they know the type of what they're going to get on the other side of things as well.
Yeah, for sure. And as South Florida sports fans, and just the hat you have on right now, we know what kind of impact the culture of a front office and coaching staff can leave on a franchise, and it can become an identity. It can become part of the DNA of what that team is about. The Miami Heat for years now, the Pat Riley, Eric Spoelstra way, that's just the way it is. And you get players that fit that, or the players that don't fit that do not stay in Miami. And now the Panthers have a chance to develop that, the Bill Zito, Paul Maurice way. This is what we have. You either fit it or you don't. If you're a good fit, this is a home for you. If you're not, then this is not the place for you to be. And it can sound harsh, but that's really that's how you win. That's how you build champions, and that's how you turn a one-off champion into a team that can consistently contend, and a team that can become a dynasty, potentially a franchise that can win multiple Stanley Cups. You establish a culture, you stick to it, you develop players in it. The people who fit stay and are rewarded for that, and the people who don't, they look elsewhere. And that's a good thing to have. That's a great thing to have when you have that competitive culture. I think the Panthers have sort of established that, and there's really no downside to having that. It's necessary to be a champion, and the Panthers hope to be a champion beyond just last season. They want to do this again and again and again, and give themselves as many chances at it as possible. So they have that window wide open now with their coach locked in. And I'll say this: I've wanted him to definitely wanted him to sign this extension as soon as possible and be a Panther for life, not just because of the Stanley Cup win, but what really won me over and assured me that this is the right guy to lead this franchise for years to come, which is how he handled the loss of the Stanley Cup against Vegas. There was such love for his players, such love for everything that they put on the line and accomplished in that season, even though it fell short. And then to come into the following training camp and be able to evaluate the level of hunger and the level of compete and that just the way he speaks about how the Panthers came into training camp last season with nothing more on their mind except avenging their loss from the previous year, and they were so motivated. To have a coach who inspires that, but also just turning the pain of that loss into something that developed into their ultimate win. That's an incredible leader.
Yeah, and knowing that whenever you are down, especially after Game 6, knowing that it's not going to be great in that room, and that feeling, you could use that to fuel and then turn it around, and then doing that for Game 7, the very next game. And obviously that 2-day gap in between Game 6 and Game 7 of the Stanley Cup final. But at that time, the quote was, "You're not going to find a lot of happy people in that room, but that won't matter 48 or 72 hours from now," something like that. And just the fact that he's honest about that. So, and just not trying to BS people with that. So that's another thing for what Paul Maurice just delivers every time we get a chance to talk to him, which is great for, once again, setting that culture for the Florida Panthers and the Florida Panthers way.
And a hell of a record in Game 7s too. Mm-hmm. Can't overlook that. He's a Game 7 winner. Mm-hmm. So got that as well.
No doubt. And by the way, I said that Frozen Frenzy, the NHL was being showcased, but I completely forgot that the NBA opening night was tonight. But for me, I'm a casual when it comes to basketball. But hey, the Miami Heat played tonight, and I want to say best of luck to them for another South Florida sports team that is filled with culture. So best of luck to the Heat tonight as they open the season against the Orlando Magic. But Jacob, I want to thank you so much for joining me on this edition of the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast, as the Florida Panthers lose to the Minnesota Wild by a final score of 5-1. But Paul Maurice does get his extension, and Panthers have an opportunity to bounce back on Thursday against the New York Rangers. But tell everybody where they can find you online, my friend.
Yep, you can follow me on X at Jacob Winans 8, and hopefully I'll see you guys back at the arena on November 7th. We got a long break until another home game, so rest up and enjoy some road hockey.
Awesome. Thank you so much, my friend, and see you next week.
Looking forward to it. Thanks for having me.
And if you like what you're hearing, please subscribe to the podcast to be notified every single time the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast jumps into your podcast feed. Don't forget to also subscribe to the other shows on the Locked On NHL network, including Locked On NHL, Locked On Fantasy Hockey, Flip Livingstone and Steel Roden, and Locked On NHL Prospects. Thank you once again for making the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast your first listen of the day. So I'm Armando Velez with Jacob Winans, and you've been listening to Locked On Florida Panthers podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, where it's your team every day.